Hi everyone, my name is Philippe Stemberger. I am a solution engineer here at Snyk, and in this session I'm going to walk you through our CI/CD integration. What is it? How does it work? What are the benefits of such an integration? I'll answer all of those questions and maybe a few more as we go through the presentation. To help us stay focused, I've put together a small agenda. The first things we're going to be looking at is the role of Snyk into the software development lifecycle, having a bit of that bigger picture. Then we'll dive into more detail into the CI/CD integration itself and looking at some of the benefits of such an integration. From there, it will be time to move towards the different configuration, what is the granularity that we can have for each testing that we can offer. And then we will finish by looking at some of the different monitoring and visibility options that this integration is providing to our applications. So when it's come to the software development lifecycle, there is a couple of areas where Snyk can help. Naturally, being a developer-first tool, we can help locally for your developer, helping them to find and test vulnerabilities and address them into their local environment. But we can also help you into your repository, making sure that we can there as well help you find and fix your vulnerabilities, but also introduce some level of monitoring. Then come the CI/CD. There, we will be able to prevent vulnerabilities from making their way all the way to production by making sure we can break your build if necessary. But that integration here is not just about breaking your build, it's also about creating visibility with the possibility of monitoring such dependencies, making sure that everything being deployed to production is now being monitored. That if any new vulnerability was to be discovered, you would be alerted. But that's not the last place where we can help you. We can also help you pass that security gate that the CI/CD represents and help you into production, into your registry, into your community cluster, and way much more. But let's dive back into that CI/CD integration and look at some of the benefits of such an integration. For me, those benefits can be categorized in three different categories. It can be about the accuracy, about the flexibility, or about having a last line of defense for our application, containers, or infrastructure as code, but more about that at the end. What do I mean by accuracy? Well, it simply means that we will have access to the exact list of dependencies being imported. Because we interact with the package manager, because we interact with the environment, it is easy for us to compile a list of all the dependencies you are leveraging, including their transitive and their transitive. As a comparison, if I was to do the same exercise in a repository, I would only have access to the manifest, which gives me the top level dependencies. But then, what are the dependencies of those dependencies and their dependencies? I would have to infer that. Into the CI/CD, I have access to this information. But we go a bit further than this. It's not just about the dependencies and their dependencies, it's also about your configuration profile. As we all know, we're not building an application exactly the same way if it is a development build or if it is a production one. So here in the CI/CD, we will be able to test exactly the profile that is of interest. If we deploy into production, we will be able to test production. And this gives us a true reflection of what is being deployed into production. Because we're going to be building the artifact into the CI/CD before sending it over, we know exactly what's going to be deployed, giving us that visibility to our production deployment without having to go all the way to production. And that kind of leads me into the last point of that accuracy, is making sure that the monitoring that we have over time will be accurate. Because again, it will be about those dependencies that we know will be in the artifact that's going to be deployed. So for all of those reasons, leveraging Snyk into your CI/CD will be extremely accurate. Then come flexibility. Flexibility can take a couple of forms, but in our case, it is a flexibility of choice that Snyk is giving you. Indeed, if at first you want to use Snyk to create an awareness, there is absolutely no problem here. You can simply decide to have visibility over your project, not making any other decision, simply creating an awareness. From there, we can slowly start to introduce constraint. We can decide to break a build if we can fix a vulnerability. After all, if it's fixable, there is no reason to deploy it to production. And then we can add further constraint. For example, only high severity will be blocked, then medium, then low, and so on and so forth. But we can also cater for more complex scenario. For example, if I want to filter all vulnerabilities that are related to a denial of service and block my build, I can do so. If I want to look at blocking a build on new vulnerability being added into my code base, after I've established a baseline for legacy application, that can be done as well. There is a wide range of situations we can do, and there is other sessions diving into those advanced scenarios. Make sure to check them out. And then the last point is really reporting versus gating. Do we want to report on every build? Do we want to gate every build? Is there any kind of transient branch that will have a build that we don't really need reporting on, but we still want the security scan? Is there some kind of deployment branch that we absolutely want reporting, but don't need the gating because everything has been validated before? Those kind of scenarios can also be adapted with our integration. Then come the last line of defense. Indeed, the CI/CD is usually the last step before deployment. This is our last opportunity for capturing any vulnerability that might have slipped through on the previous steps. It is also a great place to validate the policies and make sure that our application reflects them in terms of security, but also in terms of license compliance. This is a last line of defense because it can be owned by security. For some of our customers, the CI/CD is owned by their security team, and it's seen as a hard check, where the repository or the local testing is owned by the developers and can be seen as a soft check, making sure that developer and security and DevOps works together as one team. The next reason why the CI/CD is the last line of defense, it is because it is also the place where we will apply Snyk patches. I'm not going to go into the detail of what is a Snyk patch. If you want to know more about that, make sure to ask us a question, but this is where those patches would be applied. CI/CD is also a great place for putting any kind of gating in terms of quality, but also security. In that sense, this is another great reason to want to have Snyk into your CI/CD. So at this stage, I should have convinced you that you want Snyk into your CI/CD. If I haven't convinced you, I'll simply pretend that I have and carry on. But if you want to know how does it work in practice, then it is fairly straightforward like everything we're doing here at Snyk. It is simply a question of installing the Snyk plugin into your CI/CD and authorize it with a service account. From there, you will want to add it as an extra step into your build. Usually, you'll put this after your build and your test, but if you want to put it before the test, that's just as fine. The only recommendation would be to do this after your build, so all of your dependencies, all of your configuration have been leveraged, and it's easier for us to tap into this rather than having to import everything yourself and then do it again at the build steps. And then we will run the scan. As you might expect, this is where the magic happened, and past that scan, it is time to make a decision. Do we want to give a thumb up to the build? Do we want to give it a thumb down? Do we want reporting enabled? What kind of decision do we want to make? This is, where we exploit the result of the scan. This is very that simple. If you want more detail on specific example, there's going to be other sessions about that as well. Make sure to check them out. But in principle, regardless of your integration, either you leverage a plugin directly or you use the CLI that is designed to be embedded into your CI/CD, this is the general steps that we will follow. So far, I've talked about the why, I've talked about the how, but I haven't talked about the what is it that we want to scan. And this is a very crucial question, because if historically a developer was responsible for building an application, leveraging open source where that was applicable, nowadays with the emergence of the cloud, that scope of responsibility has really exploded. We're now asking a developer to build an application quickly and efficiently, leveraging open source, but also to define the container that will run that application, and even the configuration of that container. How do we need to deploy it? What configuration goes behind it? So we can really say that the emergence of the cloud has made infrastructure part of the code, and this is something that we need to validate into that CI/CD process. The Snyk CI/CD capabilities will cover all of those points. We will cover your open source dependencies. We will be looking at what open source are you using, which one can be trusted, and when there is vulnerabilities, which version should you use instead. We will also be looking at your container. What base image do you use? Is there a better starting point for your application? And when there is vulnerability in the resulting image, how were they introduced? Is there a fixed version we could leverage instead? And then we will also look at your infrastructure as code, looking at all of those configuration files. Are they as tight as they should be? Is there any misconfiguration that can be easily fixed, and alert you on those as well? As we have been a bit all around the place, let me recap what we covered in this session. First, we've looked at the role of Snyk into your SDLC, and we've seen that the CI/CD integration is one of many options. Then we've looked at the benefit and the accuracy that Snyk was providing by being integrated into your CI/CD. We've looked at the flexibility that such an integration was providing, as well as how it can establish a last line of defense. From there, we've looked at what are the implementation steps. How would it look in practice if you were to implement it into your own CI/CD? And then we've touched on the scope of security, what exactly it is that we need to scan. Open source dependencies, container, but also infrastructure as code. All of those can be done into your CI/CD. I hope you learned something today. Develop fast, stay secure. Philippe Stemberger, Solution Engineer at Snyk. Bye.